Welcome to Kubrick Quest Episode 7. Today we'll be talking about Stanley Kubrick's seventh feature film, the 1964 Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. Like most of Kubrick's movies, this was an adaptation based on the 1958 book called Red Alert, which was originally called 2 Hours to Doom. While Dr. Strangelove took his basic plot and story structure from the Red Alert book, there were a number of notable changes, biggest one of which being was that the character Dr. Strangelove was not in the book. After the movie came out and was very successful, there was apparently a novelization of the Dr. Strangelove movie, which also differed significantly from the original story, and this movie a little bit, because the story in this novelization is bookended by the account of aliens who arrive on Earth after it's been destroyed by nuclear war, and they try and figure out what happened. Right now, this movie is 60 years old. It came out in 1964. It has aged very well. It has held up very well. None of the humor was lost on me. It was easy to follow. It felt paced very well. I never got bored throughout this. I first saw this movie back when I was a teenager, and I just appreciate it on a comedic level, but now with my big adult brain, I probably appreciate it twice as much because I get all the historical stuff and the satire behind it. So what is this movie about? It's about the end of the world. It's about nuclear Armageddon. And it's a comedy.
Well, boys, I reckon this is it. Nuclear combat toe-to-toe with the Ruskies.
Essentially, it's a very dark satirical comedy about the fears and suspicions on both sides of the Cold War. It pokes fun at the nature of bureaucracy, the absurdity of war, and mutually assured destruction, and just how complex and precarious our whole system is, even despite all its safeguards, because it's run by incredibly flawed human beings. All it takes is one individual in the right position of authority to completely lose his mind, and the whole thing comes toppling down. It's got a number of actors in it that I know prominently from other roles. For example, hey look, it's Claire Quilty from Lolita. Hey look, it's Johnny from The Killing. Hey look, it's Darth Vader. I found that apparently this was James Earl Jones' first feature film role, so that's pretty cool. Like in the previous episode of Kubrick Quest where we talked about Lolita, this movie also features the great comedic actor Peter Sellers playing multiple prominent roles. He plays the British officer Mandrake, who's working at an American base in the film as part of an officer exchange program. He also plays the United States President, making the calls in the war room. And he also plays the title character Dr. Strangelove. Mandrake is a mild-mannered, proper British gentleman officer working at the American base as General Jack D. Ripper's second-in-command. Mandrake knows something is wrong with the general from the very start, and then his concerns increase pretty rapidly with every line Ripper says being more and more deranged and unhinged.
Have you ever seen a commie drink a glass of water? Vodka. That's what they drink, isn't it? Never water.
Peter Sellers as the US president has some especially funny scenes where he's talking to his generals and advisors, but one of the funniest scenes is when he's talking to the Russian president over the phone. This whole scene is a testament to Peter Sellers' acting abilities because we never see or even hear the other side of this conversation. All we see is what's right in front of us, him on the phone. But this is one of the funniest scenes in the movie to me. It's like a bunch of high schoolers arguing about trivial drama or gossip or something.
One of our base commanders, he had a sort of he went a little funny in the head. Why do you think I'm calling you? Just to say hello? Of course I like to speak to you.
Peter Sellers also plays the title character Dr. Strangelove, who is a weird dude. He's apparently this former Nazi scientist from World War II that knows a lot about nuclear weaponry and is advising the president, but also seems to be some kind of crazed weirdo pervert who may or may not be on drugs and also has a phantom right hand which still thinks it's in the Third Reich. From what I've read, a lot of Peter Sellers' comedic dialogue in this movie was improvised, which is rather unusual for a Kubrick movie because this man is known to be an exceptional perfectionist doing a million takes of any scene until it's exactly like he wants. Him and Peter Sellers seem to have a good enough working relationship where they trust each other in a sense that Kubrick allows him to improvise some of his most famous lines. Apparently, Peter Sellers was supposed to play another prominent role in this movie, which was the pilot of the main bomber plane throughout the plot. But Peter Sellers hurt his ankle and couldn't work within the confines of that small set. So this role instead went to the actor Slim Pickens, known for his many random roles in Western movies. This ended up being a fortunate turn of events because Slim Pickens was perfect for this role. From what I read, apparently Slim was such an authentic cowboy type of guy that when he arrived on set in England to film this movie, he was wearing his cowboy hat and the rest of that getup, and people thought he arrived in character, but that was just how he dressed. He was the guy for this role. This scene when the top secret doomsday plan is enacted and the soldiers are getting prepared, Slim Pickens tells them takes out their emergency packets, and the contents of this package is hilarious.
145 caliber automatic, vitamin pills, pep pills, sleeping pills, 1 miniature combination Russian phrase book and Bible, 9 packs of chewing gum, 1 issue of prophylactics, 3 lipsticks, 3 pair of nylon stockings.
Also, speaking about the scene, there's that line from Slim Pickens where he says a fellow could have a pretty good weekend in Vegas.
Shoot, a fella could have a pretty good weekend in Vegas with all that stuff.
Originally, that line was have a pretty good time in Dallas with all that stuff. I guess it's because he's from the South, from Texas, so maybe that's his hometown. I don't know. President Kennedy was recently assassinated in Dallas not too long before this movie came out, so in post-production, they changed that line to Vegas. That actually makes more sense to me. You know, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. You go to Vegas, do a bunch of crazy stuff. We also get this famous shot of Slim Pickens riding the bomb down at the end of the movie. Next, I'd like to share some of the notes that I took while watching this movie. First is I like the visual irony here of how often they show the sign that says peace is our profession while we're talking about blowing up the entire planet. And this whole battle here is U.S. troops firing on other U.S. troops, and there's all this violence. Love the little irony here. The voiceover at the beginning of this movie makes us feel like a newsreel or a documentary.
The Soviet Union had been at work on what was darkly hinted to be the ultimate weapon, a doomsday device.
Which I think is probably the whole point because this is poking fun at real-world events. Fictional real-world events, you know. I like how the voiceover describes how seriously the US is taking its defense planes flying around the globe 24/7, and then immediately cuts to a soldier looking at a Playboy magazine and playing with cards. The Ants Go Marching song played throughout the movie makes me think of the scale of this whole thing. You know, like we look at a bunch of ants going to war, that could be the end of the world for them. But to aliens watching us, we'd probably just seem like a bunch of ants destroying ourselves. The whole scene in the big war room where they're discussing Plan R was hilarious.
You approved it, sir, you must remember.
The president approved this plan that he doesn't even remember, which, when enacted, basically overrules his power and sets about the end of the world.
The idea was for Plan R to be a sort of retaliatory safeguard.
A safeguard.
I admit the human element seems to have failed us here.
Jack Ripper is an unhinged madman, and Sterling Hayden does a great job in this role. This is an iconic performance. He does a great job playing a person absolutely off his rocker.
War is too important to be left to politicians. They have neither the time, the training, nor the inclination for strategic thought.
Part of the fun about this and the way this character is written is that he goes on these crazy monologues. He sounds logical, as in the tone of voice. He's taking what he's saying very seriously, but it makes no goddamn sense.
The international communist conspiracy to sap and impurify all of our precious bodily fluids.
The doomsday machine that the Russian guy is talking about, which was supposed to ideally stop both sides from launching the bombs at each other, that was supposed to be announced in a few days. You know, this whole disaster couldn't have waited like 24 hours.
Whole point of the doomsday machine is lost. If you keep it a secret, why didn't you tell the world, eh?
It was to be announced at the party congress on Monday.
This character Mandrake is dealing with towards the end of the movie is so comically slow.
They won't accept the call. Have you got 55 cents?
Well, you don't think I'd go into combat with loose change in my pocket, do you?
This is like, there is no time to wait. And this is the slowest guy in the world shows up.
I want you to shoot the lock off it. There may be some change in there.
I'm going to get your money for you. But if you don't get the President of the United States on that phone, you know what's going to happen to you?
What?
You're going to have to answer to the Coca-Cola company.
I think it's funny that in the end, George C. Scott was right, and the Russian guy was actually spying on them, because one of the very last shots in the movie, he's taking secret photos of the war room and their big board. So back in the Kubrick Quest episode on Spartacus, I included a section called Stanley Pain in the Ass Kubrick. Well, I'm going to have to include that again. So here's another Stanley Pain in the Ass Kubrick. story. George C. Scott did not want to play General Turgidson in such an outlandish manner, but Kubrick did want him to play the character in a crazy way, and he played a dirty little trick on George C. Scott, where Kubrick told him to do his wild, crazy takes, and they would be just for fun, just for practice, and the real takes would be the serious ones, and those would be the ones that made it in the movie. But that's not what happened. Apparently this caused George C. Scott to swear to never work with Kubrick again. In the end, I thought the final result was hilarious. His character is one of the best in the movie, but on a personal level, that would annoy me too. I kind of get it. Some of the footage from Dr. Strangelove, that B-roll footage behind the plane of the aerial shots of the mountains and the lakes and all that, apparently some of that flying footage was reused in the Beatles' Magical Mystery Tour film. This prompted Stanley Kubrick to call up the people that made the Magical Mystery Tour movie and complain. If you did not know, there's a movie that came out around the same time as Dr. Strangelove. It had a very similar plot. This movie was Failsafe. Whereas Dr. Strangelove is a dark satirical comedy, Failsafe is dead serious. Basically the same situation in both movies, but Failsafe is a drama. It is not meant to be funny. Failsafe was also based on a book, also called Failsafe. Like the movies, these books were very similar. In fact, so much so that the author of Red Alert sued the author of Failsafe, and they settled that out of court. Kubrick was worried that if Failsafe was released first, that it would hurt the box office performance of Dr. Strangelove. So, to make sure his movie came out first, Stanley Pain in the Ass Kubrick sued the production of Failsafe on the basis that their source novel plagiarized his movie's source novel, which Kubrick purchased the creative rights to film. This lawsuit, cost time and money, delayed the release of Failsafe. The lawsuit settled out of court, and as part of the resulting agreement was that Strangelove would release first. Failsafe was released in theaters 8 months after Strangelove, was well received critically, but its ticket sales were modest compared to Strangelove. People were like, oh, another movie about nuclear Armageddon. I already saw that one. Next, I want to talk about some of the random fun thoughts I had while watching this movie. A lot of these characters have very funny names in this movie. For example, we've got Jack D. Ripper. Jack the Ripper. Get it? Haha. Colonel Bat Guano.
Now look, Colonel Bat Guano, if that really is your name.
Which means shit, so he's batshit, like batshit crazy. Get it? Haha. Very funny. Russian Premier Kiss Off, which kind of sounds like piss off or fuck off or something. Slim Pickens' character is named Lieutenant King Kong. The opening of this movie features planes refueling mid-air in a rather sexual manner with this kind of sappy romantic love scene music playing behind it. This may be just me, but this lady, who is actually the only female character in this movie, strangely enough, I think the way she is dressed in this bikini and sunglasses kind of reminds me of Lolita's sunglasses and bikini outfit when we first see her. Also, speaking of this scene, I like how they're telling such sensitive and secret information to this guy's mistress over the phone. I don't think that's how it would actually happen. Was this trip from George C. Scott planned? If it was, it's pretty convincing, but it doesn't look planned, which makes it even funnier.
With the proper breeding techniques and a ratio of, say, 10 females to each male.
After which you will be required to select from the matrix 23 individuals, 16 female, 7 male, to rebuild Zion.
While doing research for this video, I found that the name of the communication device used in the bomber was CRM-114.
Special coded device, which I believe is designated as CRM-114.
Apparently this became sort of a running joke for Stanley Kubrick and the rest of his movies. For example, in A Clockwork Orange, Serum 114 was the name of a drug injected into Alex to help with his reformation during that whole sequence. As I was rewatching this movie, I thought that it would work very well as a stage play because it's essentially just a bunch of people talking in rooms. And hey look, it turns out that they actually recently turned it into a play and it's being performed in London's West End. Man, if I was there, I would go see this. Apparently the movie was supposed to end with a giant pie fight going on in the big war room. There are varying accounts of why this was actually left out of the final cut of the movie. The most plausible one that I saw was that Kubrick just felt this turned it into more of a farce. Like, as soon as you get everyone to start throwing pies in each other's faces, this just becomes a straight comedy, not a satirical comedy. Would I recommend this movie? Yes, absolutely, 100%. I think this is one of Kubrick's best movies. It's one of the first ones I saw, and still one of my favorite ones today. It's got satire, it's got dark and scary and thoughtful themes. It's also got incredible performances. It never feels slow or boring. It never loses its pacing. The plot is always developing, and there's always These mounting problems upon problems that just add to the comedy of the whole situation. If you've never seen a Stanley Kubrick movie before, I think that this is a great place to start. One of the best Kubrick movies, in my opinion. If you haven't seen it, go check it out, and you will learn that the real nuclear Armageddon is the friends we made along the way. So that's about all I've got for today. If you stuck around to this point in the video, thank you. I appreciate it very much, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.